Okay, guys, we're back for part two of the progressives. I know it's exciting. I know you just can't wait to learn more about this period. I mean, that's like me. I just can't wait to learn about this, and I'm having a lot of fun rereading this. Every year I teach this, I learn something new. I add something to the body of knowledge that I have, and it's just amazing to me how much there is to really know. So. Anyway, I hope you're comfortable. I hope you have a pen, some paper, and that you're taking good and complete notes. That's what we're looking for. So, and please, if you have questions, write them down, and we'll try to answer those questions in class. So here goes. I think we got cut off talking about the state level progressives. And I think I had talked about Robert La Follette, the governor of Wisconsin, who got elected in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and would be a really dynamic and vital figure in the progressive movement at the state level. And he would influence governors of New York and California, two rather large states, in really believing that government had a job and a duty to attack political and social problems and the corruptions in the system that really undermined or ate away at the foundations of democracy. And again, those foundations of democracy, best stated, I think, by Thomas Jefferson, it is worth repeating, the idea that we're all created equal, the idea that we all have the same rights to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, whatever that may be. And Robert La Follette, as a governor and a politician, really felt that the system had gone amok and lost sight of the people and the people's basic rights and needs. And so as a governor, he's going to do all he can to regulate corporations, bring them into line, better services, better prices, and eliminate those corrupt practices, mergers and trusts, and that were really limiting competition and limiting options for the people. Well, and I didn't put this up on the screen, but there is another governor. I mentioned New York State, 1898, Theodore Roosevelt, who then later became president in 1901. He too took up the baton, really, of progressive reform. And as governor of New York, he really went after different areas of corruption, in particular the operations of large businesses, protecting natural resources from overuse and abuse, something we're still hearing about today. So I think the progressive legacy is still with us when we talk about environmentalism and concerns we have about the earth and sustainability. And Roosevelt also went after police forces in large cities like New York that had been corrupt and really not doing their job very well or fairly, favoring different ethnic groups, taking payoffs and bribes to protect certain individuals, whether they be criminal organizations or businesses themselves, that were intent on getting ahead by taking shortcuts and or breaking the law. And again, that was something that progressives just simply could not tolerate. Felt that why should we tolerate that in the United States of America? We need to get back to those ideals. We need to begin to clean up society, bring about the changes and reforms so that we could, again, reconstruct society for the people. So, again, that emphasis of putting people back into the equation. So that's at the state level. Now let's move from state level into the realm of religion, something we don't often talk about, though religion is an important aspect of life for many Americans today and certainly in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And we're going to encounter a man by the name of Walter Rauschenbusch, a German, who was the pastor of the Second German Baptist Church in New York City in a neighborhood called Hell's Kitchen. And I think the name of that neighborhood, which still exists today, tells you everything you need to know about it. And it was not a pleasant, nice place to be, but was, in fact, hell because of overcrowded conditions, poor everything, if you will, services, the lack of sanitation, bad air, you name it. This was just not a pleasant place to live. But Walter Rauschenbusch establishes this church, and he begins to preach what becomes known as the social gospel movement. And the gospel movement, and again, if you don't know what the gospel is the heart and soul, really, of Christianity. And it's the writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who write the four gospels. And that really is the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. So again, while this is not a religion class, we need to be aware that the Gospels were something that most Americans were familiar with, that they knew, they understood the teachings, they understood the images and the parables that are in those Gospels, and that was something And so religion is going to play a key role in the progressive reform movement as well. And what we're going to see in particular is the idea that Christians have a duty to improve life on earth rather than simply focusing on how to get to heaven after death by being a good Christian, by following the teachings. So the idea was to use Christian ideas and values here and now, every day, to live a better life and to help others achieve that better life. And so Walter Rauschenbusch worked tirelessly in New York City, and he thought really that capitalism was responsible for creating a fierce and hostile atmosphere under which men and women and children really suffered the social evils of a system that they could not understand and could not control. And therefore, he wanted Christians, especially capitalists and managers, to become more humane, to become more loving and more embracing of people's real needs, and to value each and every human being for their intrinsic worth. So it's kind of an interesting approach, and it really did take off then, and it's still with us today. In fact, under President George W. Bush in the early 2000s, he had what was called the Faith-Based Initiative Program that said, look, if we want to provide help to people, churches are probably the best way because they are the closest to the communities where people live and need the help. And people come to church every week on Sundays and throughout the week, so that it would be a great way to reach out to people where the help is most needed. So this idea, again, the legacy of the progressive movement, I think, is still very much with us. So moving from religion, we're now going to move over to education and reforms. And you see here pictured one of the most prominent and most important, though again forgotten probably, reformers in the educational world, and his name is John Dewey. He worked at the University of Chicago and developed a whole theory and philosophy about education. And I think the quote you see there is really, I think, very, very good, and it really captures his ideas. And he says, if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And his idea was that education was kind of conservative, it was kind of old-fashioned, it didn't change, it didn't innovate, it didn't really meet the needs of present-day society. And he said, look, teachers need to teach students how to live today and into the future, not by teaching them the way that they had always been taught, but by embracing new methods to allow students to become engaged, to become active, to voice their ideas and opinions. And I wonder whether we meet the goal today as educators in our current system of education that relies a lot on standardized testing, state testing, this and that, this measure, that measure, whether we're really teaching you all in some ways how to live today and into tomorrow with the skills that you'll need to be successful to navigate the challenges of life. And certainly Dewey was very influential in that idea, and he even believed that education, and I quote, is the fundamental method of social progress and reform, end quote. And I absolutely agree with John Dewey that education really is the only way to bring about changes and reforms in a society. And again, that was one of those fundamental questions that progressives ask. What does it mean to be educated? So we'll move on from John Dewey and his idea about schools to the idea of muckrakers. And muckrakers was a name assigned to a whole series of authors and journalists. And the term muckraker came from a 17th century, that is 1600s, English work of literature called Pilgrim's Progress. And you can notice already in the title, Pilgrim going out on a mission to make the world a better place, and progress, bringing about those changes and reforms to, in fact, make the world a better place. So it seemed like a fitting title or label to give writers and journalists who were progressives and who really wanted to embark on that mission that Melville talked about, leaving the safety of port, going out into the stormy seas, meeting the challenges, writing about them in order to create progress. And I think, let's jump to the end there at the bottom. The goal, really, I think, of the muckrakers can be summed up as to shock, to awaken, and call to action, call people to act. So not only did you have to wake people up, but you sometimes had to shock them out of their complacency, get their attention, and then ultimately get them to act. And there were a number of writers, too many to mention here, but we can look at the first, and you'll see this on the left. Ida Tarbell was a woman, and again a female. Really interesting to note how many females are involved in the progressive movement. But she really, while her friends called her sweet and gracious, she really was a courageous woman who wrote scathing attacks against John Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust, which was, in fact, then eventually broken up by the court system in 1912, 1913. So Ida Tarbell was the first to really expose the workings of Rockefeller and his trust and how it undermined competition, how it hurt people. While Rockefeller said he helped people by providing oil at lower prices, in reality, he did away with competition and hurt more people than he helped. The other writer that we'll look at there is Theodore Dreiser in the middle, and he wrote a novel titled Sister Carrie in the year 1900. And the novel really tells the story of a small-town girl from the Midwest who moved to Chicago, then the big booming city, looking for work. And it really kind of chronicles or follows this girl as she goes through daily life in the big city and falls to the temptations of life in an amoral city. So she finds herself involved with different men, some of them married, etc., some of them promising her to get married, and seemingly nothing really works out as she had hoped it would. So there were serious problems. Again, big cities brought great opportunities, but they also brought different types of lifestyles, some of them healthy, some of them not healthy, some of them moral, some of them not moral. And this was one of the great challenges of the rise of big cities. And Sister Carrie and Theodore Dreiser really addresses that. And the last novel you see there on the left is entitled The Jungle, written by Upton Sinclair in the early 1900s, and he really exposes the unsafe and unsanitary conditions in Chicago's meatpacking plants, and the availability of meat with the availability of refrigerated train cars that could transport the butchered meat and finished meat products such as bacon and ham and all of those things across the country rapidly really led to the rise of Chicago as the center for the meatpacking industry. And Upton Sinclair actually spent 7 weeks working in a meatpacking plant, took notes about what he saw, and then created this novel that really showed the ills and the disgusting conditions that existed in these plants, and it really shocked people into action. In fact, in 1905-1906, the Congress of the United States passes the Meat Protection Act, which was designed to promote healthy sanitary conditions in meatpacking plants to ensure good quality meat so that people would no longer get ill from consuming meat that they had bought at stores. So we have there the idea of muckrakers trying to shock people, trying to awaken people, and trying to call people into action. So in conclusion, the progressive period of the 1890s set the stage for the arrival of three presidents that I already mentioned earlier: President Theodore Roosevelt, President William H. Taft, and President Woodrow Wilson, that would really be involved in some of the serious and heavy lifting of the progressive period by passing different laws and signing different laws into different pieces of legislation into law, rather, if I can get that out, that would really kind of reshape the American political landscape that we've talked about, would reshape the economy of the United States, that would reshape the social situations, and really kind of, again, put the emphasis on the people and try to restore dignity and humanity to U.S. society. So I think in that regards, the progressive period was a rather important development, one that we should understand because it will come back, and we will see this in the 1930s during the Great Depression under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who won a presidential election 4 times. He's going to draw on the experiences of the progressive period. We'll see this later in the 1990s with President Bill Clinton, and today, I think, with President Barack Obama and the idea of health care, whether one likes it or not. The idea is, again, trying to promote the cause of humanity and what it means to be human through government action and intervention. And of course, we're going to see other periods of time in our history in the 20th century when people were not trustful of the government, that wanted a smaller government, a government that wouldn't interfere. So really, that's it for today, guys. I hope you guys do well. We'll see you soon.